Your adventure in Baldur's Gate 3 starts on a beach, but did you know that it was originally going to end on one too? Or that this steel watcher was made out of Karlach parts? In this video, I'm going to take you to heaven and hell, and of course the asylum. But before that, we're going to begin in the upper city sewers. I know it's not exactly the most scenic place to start, but it's worth it to find Minthara hiding down here. If you didn't kill her in Act 1, and you didn't recruit her in Act 2, she will remain under the control of the Absolute and join the group that got stuck on sewer duty.
For the Absolute!
If you free her from Moonrise Towers, but then tell her to kick rocks, her dialogue will even hint at this outcome.
I admire your confidence. But when you next see me, I may have the Absolute's armies at my back.
If this isn't your first time seeing Minthara in the sewer, then let's take it up a notch. If you hand the Night Song over to Balthazar without recruiting Minthara into your party, she'll turn up as a zombie inside the Mind Flayer colony, even if you killed her in Act 1. Once you break out of your pod to take on Balthazar, she'll join in on the combat. But she's really stupid and likes to just waste her turn on dashing nowhere. So you can ignore her while you finish off old Balth and the other zombies, and then just leave the room without fighting her. As soon as you get far enough away, you'll break combat and you can just move on. Once you finally reach the High Hall sewers, zombie Minthara is down there waiting for you. But we're not done yet. If you saved the tieflings in Act 1, but didn't free them from Moonrise Prison before letting Balthazar take the Night Song, every one of the prisoners will also show up as a zombie inside the Mind Flayer colony. So, what happens if you take off and leave them alive? You get zombie Lacrissa serving drinks in the Elf Song Tavern.
You too good looking. Now get out of here. Can't be acting all soppy in front of the customers.
This works because the zombies are not technically considered dead, and any surviving tiefling refugees are set to a new, friendly faction as soon as you reach Act 3. Before we leave the sewers, I've seen a lot of people ask about this invisible helper, and the answer is, it's not used for anything. Sorry to let you down. But let's try to get an idea of what it might have been intended to do. The invisible helper's internal name and layer data suggested it would have been the source of a bit of dialogue from the Netherbrain during a tentacle attack on this poor doomed goblin. Excuse me, I mean doomed goblin. Maybe the tentacle would have broken through that sewer grate on the wall, or just through the ceiling like this one. The invisible helper is green on the minimap because it's set to a friendly faction just like the invisible voice of the Absolute in the asylum. If you don't know how to get to the sewers, there are actually a few entrances, but this helpful cultist corpse will give you directions to the closest one. Just walk south from the Watch Citadel, hop down here, and bust through the rusted iron gate. Oh, and even though the Citadel has a bell tower, I'm sorry to say that ringing the bell doesn't summon any sheep. I'm willing to bet that most of you have never seen this particular steel watcher here in the High Hall courtyard, because it only appears under circumstances even less common than Minthara in the sewer, though maybe not zombie Minthara in the sewer. First, you gotta let Karlach try to attack Gortash during the coronation, and watch her get dragged off to jail by a steel watcher. Then, head down into Worm's Rock Prison and talk to Karlach, but tell her that she's not welcome in the party if she's gonna go rogue. After that, leave Karlach to rot in her cell and take off without her. Once you exit the prison, your quest log will report that Karlach is gone for good. That's because she ran off to try to kill Gortash by herself, and failed. So, this one last steel watcher is probably made with Karlach's heart, and possibly the rest of her. The courtyard was also once meant to contain any companion that had previously left your party, as they'd been claimed by the Absolute.
Dead or alive, the Absolute will claim you!
Which I suppose makes sense, as they would have lost the Emperor's protection, just like Minthara. Moving on up to the top of High Hall, did you know that attacking the brainstem causes a brainquake? But more importantly, there's an even higher section of High Hall hidden in the game's files. This rooftop section is only briefly mentioned in a couple small dialogue files, but they imply that you would have climbed up and fought the Netherbrain in this area. And by Netherbrain, I mean that giant face brain in the background, not the little brain, or this big brain in the Morphic pool, or this fake brain in the middle of nowhere, or even this brain in the asylum. This one starts out being named Elder Brain, as it's the source of some of the brain dialogue, such as the scene when you first reach the Morphic pool. But as soon as you encounter the big brain in the pool, this asylum brain changes its name to the Netherbrain for all future dialogue. There's actually a fair bit of cut content related to the Morphic pool. For starters, it was going to be possible to find us waiting here, encouraging you to meet with the Elder Brain and embrace the grand design. There are also unfinished dialogue files that show the Netherbrain creating so-called nether illusions of each of the companions as they traversed the area, taunting them for their weaknesses. And instead of going straight to High Hall from the Astral Prism, it seems the portal was going to send you back to the Morphic pool, where you would see that the Netherbrain had taken off. There's dialogue in the files for this scene, but it's a bit rough.
It's gone to the city. We must follow.
To actually reach High Hall from here, you would have had to climb these vines, but unfortunately clicking them now does nothing. After defeating the brain, the gang celebrates together on this dock, the brownest place in Faerun. So let's take a look around a bit and see what's here. You'd probably assume this lever doesn't do anything, but it actually lets you decide if a trolley should run over 10 tiefling children or 1 Shadowheart. And I don't know who built this place, but I'm guessing it was Wile E. Coyote. However, evidence in the files suggests that dock was not the original location for the final scenes with the companions. Despite what words Astarion actually says here,
I honestly don't mind what we do once we get to the... Ow!
there's a developer note that states his whole line would have been about getting off this beach. Also, every character has a designated spot around this blanket, with Karlach in the middle. They're even lined up in alphabetical order. What? No, I'm not going to make a joke about how this looks. There's also a trigger nearby that's labeled as the viewpoint for Gale's orb explosion when he destroys the brain, with the spot that's used in the finished game having a very similar name. You can also tell that this location used the Act 1 beach as a starting point. Not only because of these various spots that line up, but also because of this crab. It's left over from an unfinished early access quest, but explaining that is going to have to wait for another video. Speaking of Astarion, when playing him as your avatar and remaining a vampire spawn, the ending will feature a short scene of him hiding in a dark cave with a friend. Even though you only get a brief glimpse of it, they put a fair bit of effort into making it look good. It even has a nice view of the city. As for Gale's avatar ending, if you meet up with Mystra in outer space, it sorta looks like they're standing on something. And that's because they are. You can't move around on this invisible platform, but it does give you a chance to have a very scenic conversation with your companions. And what about Karlach's ending? Well, Avernus is also an actual spot you can explore, and it's way below the rest of the map, which seems like where it should be. Though I don't know where Karlach thought she was running to, since there's a drop-off just a few meters in front of her. There's not a whole lot else to see out here besides these floating rocks and these spires. The axe that Karlach always has equipped during that scene is waiting for her here in the asylum. No sign of her cigars, though. Now that we're in the asylum, let's see what else is here. This netherstone says it's a Gortash stone placeholder, even though it looks like Ketheric stone. It's not used for anything, so I don't know what place it was meant to hold. This banana also has no purpose in the game, but it does weigh 10 kilograms, so maybe it was just used for scale. This version of Bane who forgot his clothes is just a placeholder for an earlier version of the Gods and Monsters ending, where Withers would address the Dead Three directly rather than just a painting of them. There are still triggers for each individual god, but they're out here in the void. When Raphael monologues at you about the crown after the credits, he's actually standing right here, on just a little bit of lanceboard. But it seems that the Dead Three were not the only big shots intended to make an appearance, as there's also a placeholder for Mephistopheles waiting around in the asylum. And he also has his own designated spot near Raphael. But there's a bit more than just that. There's also a level in the game files called Raphael Punished that's pretty rough but does look suitably fiery for old Meph's tastes. Maybe he was going to punish Raphael for taking the crown, or for not getting it back after it was stolen, I don't know, but he was getting punished for something. On that note, there are also a lot of mentions of Mephisto's vault being an actual place you would visit, with the Orphic Hammer being kept there instead of in the House of Hope. The template for the Orphic Hammer even has Mephisto's vault in the name. Unfortunately, the level itself has nothing to it but a few triggers, so we can't go there. Oh, and in case you're wondering what triggers are, that's just Larian's term for any designated spot on the map used for all sorts of things. For example, if someone suddenly teleports to a spot, there's probably a trigger there. Of course, they're invisible, so you can't see them, but just about anywhere you go in the game is full of them. Before we move on to the epilogue, let's take a look at what else is in the asylum. As always, the Pixie and Monk are best friends, together forever. And the friends you made along the way are all stacked up right here, waiting for you to summon them into battle against the Brain. This red dragon says it's meant to be Voss's fire-breathing assistant, but it's never actually used. It is shaped like the other red dragons that are used to create the shadows on the ground when they fly overhead in the courtyard. But it's just blocking the view in here, so let me get it out of the way. The new friends you can summon to help you are all lined up back here, with the exception of this one Mind Flayer. It has only one purpose: to test this particular animation. Yep, that's it. But I had to change its faction to show it to you since it defaults to the same enemy faction as the rest of the Brain's forces, which leads to this happening. There's also a trigger nearby designed to test this spell, which tosses a bomb that summons a Mind Flayer. But you can also cast it anywhere else on this map. It seems someone forgot to delete this goblin. And I don't know what he was meant to celebrate, but I like to imagine that it was the ending where the Absolute wins the game. And hey, shouldn't you be dancing? Okay, that's better. Hiding next to the goblin, there's a tiny little invisible nautiloid. But the real nautiloid out there in the distance is the one that pops in during the Brain fight to rain fire down on the battlefield. Speaking of that fight, if you ditch the Emperor, you'll fight against these Dream Guardians, or as the developers call them, Super Daisies, which just doesn't sound very threatening. They're supposed to be disguised to look like your custom Daisy, but it just ends up using the default appearance for that race. As for your companions, it just sticks with the defaults you see here, without anyone specific for each origin character. That's why Astarion's doesn't look like Cazador. On the other hand, if you side with the Emperor, these are the countermeasure thralls that will show up during the fight, and they're changed to match the class of the corresponding character. Though if you're multi-classing, it just picks one of your chosen classes at random. And you might be thinking this is one of the tentacles that pops up to attack you on top of the Brain, but nope. Its only purpose is as a spot for a debug command to test teleporting the nautiloid. Hey, don't ask me. The Big Brain and all its friends here are the same faction as that Mind Flayer I showed, so if someone from that back line was to make it over here, they'll attack them too. In fact, if you wait long enough, the Steel Watcher will kill the Brain all on its own. The true hero of Baldur's Gate. After the narrator says,
"And it's all because of you.
We've finally reached the epilogue. And if you made the deal with Raphael, but then let Gale take the crown anyway, he'll show up to whine about it. But before that, he's waiting patiently down here in the asylum. Though if you made a trip to the House of Hope, he probably looks more like this. Raphael also has some rough draft dialogue that implies he would have shown up earlier during the party scene to take part in the festivities, and to demand the crown from you directly, or thank you for leaving it in the river for him. It looks like this was just replaced by the Gale conversation and the post-credits scene. If your avatar ascends to the heavens with Gale, that's not really your character, but actually this dummy in the asylum, wearing this robe, and disguised to look like them. Which is why Shadowheart's hair is black during that scene, though I think that's getting fixed in patch 8. If your avatar is a Mind Flayer, then the dummy is disguised as this one right here. They don't get to wear the robe, but at least they get some shiny gold armor. Once you get to Elysium, Gale says he has more to show you, and I hope he does because there's not all that much to see on this tiny platform. Though I will say those towers in the distance are really tall. Vlaakith is standing around in the asylum so that she can, give Lae'zel a new sword, there in her throne room. And I've been wanting to show you all this location for a long time. We've got some nice dragon statues, the braziers, which you can change from lit to even more lit, and these paintings of Vlaakith on the walls that don't show up anywhere else in the game. Yoink! The portrait in the creche is a different item with a different description, and it can't be looted. So what does Vlaakith keep in her chest? Just this? I was expecting, some kind of treasures fit for a queen. Speaking of, you can't sit on her throne, but you can sit in her throne. And what's this back here? Altar of Baal? What sort of shenanigans is Vlaakith up to? Okay, back to the asylum where we find Karlach's stuffed bear, Clive. He will only be down here if Karlach died on the dock or when she's your avatar. Otherwise, Clive is teleported to Karlach's pocket so that she can play with him during the party. Though she can also have fun with him anywhere else she wants. Even Mind Flayer Karlach has Clive, but sadly she never gets to play with him. If for some strange reason you don't have Scratch in your camp, the inert astral prism will be down here in the asylum, instead of in his mouth where it should be. In fact, any character that could be at the party but wasn't around to get their invitation will be teleported to this spot, though some of them don't get along very well. This chest contains every item that was in your inventory unless you've got it equipped or bound. And right next to it is a letter? Actually, it's a whole lot of letters. All the possible letters start out here before the correct ones are sent into the chest in camp. A few impossible letters are here too, so let's cover a bit of that. It is actually possible to see the letters from Shadowheart's parents in-game, but only under very specific conditions. You ready? First of all, Shadowheart has to save her parents, of course. If you're playing as Avatar Shadowheart, you have to reach this solo ending scene, meaning you had no living romance partner after leaving the dock. Then you gotta pick this choice to go live on the farm with your parents. On the other hand, if Shadowheart is a companion, you must be in a romance with her, since the choice you need to make is in this scene. To get the letters, your avatar cannot retire to the farm with Shadowheart. This means that if you're a Mind Flayer, the correct flag is set if you don't try to talk her into taking your tentacles back to the farm, which will also end the romance during the epilogue. Though if you're not a Mind Flayer, you need to straight up tell her that you're really not into farms and then take off. But in this case, the romance is not ended in the epilogue. She'll just ditch her parents and go on adventures with you. Okay, so you did all that, but you still don't see the letters? That's because, unlike every other one, the letters from Shadowheart's parents are sent directly to her inventory instead of into the chest. If Shadowheart is your avatar, they're right there in your bag. But if she's your companion, you guessed it, you gotta pickpocket her just to read them. Kaga's letter, Koga, whatever. Her letter can be seen in-game, but only under weird circumstances. Naturally, you gotta turn her away from the Shadow Druids and end the Ritual of Thorns. But after that, you have to just take off without ever dealing with the goblin leaders. If you help the tieflings to leave the grove, the letter won't show up in the epilogue chest. The letters from Isabel or Nightsong would be easy to get, but the script checks for this flag when it should check for this flag. I mean, everyone knows that. As long as Alfira is alive, she'll send you a letter, even if you never actually talk to her. Oddly, she doesn't mention that Lacrissa is a zombie. This so-called letter from Zevlor is actually a letter from Francesca, who Halsin can potentially put in charge of the grove. But as of patch 7, there are no requirements that unlock this letter. Maybe some of these letters will be fixed in patch 8. Gale's improvised letter is waiting here until his spectral version hands it over, either after Gale used the orb to blow up the Netherbrain, or if he tried, and failed, to become a god. And the text is changed to match your relationship with him. Or at least it's supposed to be, but I already covered all that in another video. And if you were in a partnership with Gale, you'll have a chance to hear his romantic final words.
The orb.
If the Dark Urge gave in to the Urge, but refused to control the Netherbrain, then agreed to lock themselves in prison, these are the clothes they'll be wearing in the scene with Withers. And this other set of clothes is here for you to piss in when showing up to the party, after busting out of jail. And no wonder she got out of prison so easily, the cell door wasn't even locked. Before we take a look around in here, let's brighten up the mood a bit. That's better. And if this place looks familiar, that's because it's copied from Heapside Prison in the lower city. Let's see what's out this back door. Impossible to open, nice try. For some reason, instead of being in the asylum, the Pixie and Monk are standing out here, even though the Pixie Bell gets moved to the chest, so there's no way to summon her. And finally, the epilogue also features my new favorite trigger name. Don't delete because shipped in patch 4 and will crash older save games if removed. So at long last, we've covered every level in the game. If you haven't seen the earlier levels, you can click the Act 1 video right here. If you have seen the earlier levels, you can click it anyway and see them all over again. Thanks for watching.